1 year ago today, Rob Paone decided to leave his job and start his very first company. He had been working in various sales and business development and recruiting jobs in the past and decided it was time to combine all of those skills together as an entrepreneur. He had also built up a popular crypto YouTube channel with over 100,000 subscribers, and to this day, he is still known on the internet as Crypto Bobby. So in June of 2019, Rob launched Proof of Talent, a recruiting firm designed specifically for the crypto industry. But for the first 4 months of business, he didn't make a single dollar. It was only after that his first deal went through, and since then, Proof of Talent has been on a tear. And the other day, I got to chat with Rob about how he went from making $0 for 4 months in a row to now doing over $60,000 in revenue in the span of a year. We also talked about how he's thinking about scaling the business, avoiding competition, and building his team, and the importance of persistence and patience as an early stage bootstrapped founder. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Tell me a bit about your background, how you got started, and how this business came up. Because you were working in the crypto industry for a little bit. You had a YouTube channel specifically devoted to crypto, and then you made the shift to building your own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on. It's just to, I guess, give some overall context professionally. So after I graduated college, I worked in recruiting for a mid-sized company, like 60 people. Now it's about 300 people, but pretty fast-growing IT recruiting firm in Washington, D.C. Did that for a few years, and then ended up moving into the software sales world, which I kind of worked in until I actually started the YouTube channel. And I was in a full-time job. I was in enterprise sales at Oracle, and I was working from home, and I had a camera and a microphone, and decided to just start the YouTube channel randomly, and that kind of snowballed into its own thing, and I just got really excited about the crypto world, as did basically everybody else in the world in 2017, and wanted to work full-time in the industry. So left my job at Oracle to work at a company called Fluidity, which was the parent company of Airswap, where I did a similar like sales growth, biz dev type stuff for about a year, a little bit over a year and a half. And at the tail end of that, it was actually close to exactly a year or so ago now, just was trying to piece together what I wanted to do next in my career, and was kind of evaluating different things. And I worked for a number of different companies, and I wanted to go off and do my own thing, and kind of felt like I was at the point in my life and the point in my career where like I could afford to take that risk. And I didn't have any great ideas for a while, and just like one day I was driving up to Boston to see my sister and my mom for Easter, and had the idea to start a recruiting firm in the blockchain space, and ended up over the course of like 2 months doing a bunch of research just to see like, is anybody else doing this? If they are they doing it to a degree to which you think you could maybe compete better against? And went through that kind of market research process, and ended up leaving my job June 27th of 2019. So coming up as of the time of recording this, almost exactly a year ago to start Proof of Talent.
Nice. And as I think about this now, as you talk about your background, this Proof of Talent, it really seems like it is a combination of all your past experiences. You got the recruiting, the sales, the blockchain, and you just kind of combine them into this one.
That was a lot of the thought process behind it. Is like, all right, what am I good at? I want to go into business. I want to do my own thing, but I'm not just going to jump into something that I don't know anything about. And I've worked at, it was really interesting too, working at a company like Airswap, where it was the first time, not necessarily that I was even just like selling a product, but I was kind of involved in the product design. And I learned pretty quickly, like, there are some people that are phenomenal software and product people, and I'm just not one of those people. I'm much more of a service-based business person, where it's kind of more on the activity and the service that's provided. I just don't have that mind for product. And I felt like, okay, I have a background in recruiting. I've done sales, so I can handle the client, the business development side. And I've actually worked within the industry before too. So over the course of time where I was working with Fluidity, I built up just a number of contacts from within the industry that I felt like I could kind of leverage. And even during the market research and kind of the the research aspect of that time, I was able to talk to different people about how they went about the recruiting process and kind of get almost like trial customers before even like leaving the job, just so I knew, okay, like if I go and do this, there's actually demand for this and there's actually people that might be interested in what I'm about to do.
Right. And this was this your first real business you had built? I guess YouTube, you could count that as a business. Was that earning money at all, or was it ad revenue?
This was the first like real, I would say, like business I've ever. The YouTube channel I made money on, and even going all the way back to like college, like I always was interested in entrepreneurship. I always wanted to make money on the side. I always wanted to like be kind of in control of my own destiny. But from the week after I graduated college, I've had a full-time job throughout from that moment up until I left Airswap to start Proof of Talent. So this was like the first time ever in my life that I've ever had a situation where I don't have a salary coming in, I don't have benefits, I don't have anything else. It's like you're on your own now. You got to go. You have to go build a business and you have to make money. Otherwise, you're not going to be paying rent anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to me about that first month. You leave Airswap and now all of a sudden you've got this business and you were the only person at the time, right? There was no other employees, and coming from a non-technical background, how do you think about building this in that early stage? Like, what was your process there?
Yeah, so recruiting in general is a kind of like a two-sided marketplace type of situation. You have basically two kind of distinct groups of people that you're concerned about. One, you have the hiring company or like the client side, which is you build the relationships with those companies and we have agreements in place. Essentially, they're contingency-based agreements that allow us to work on the opportunities that they have, and then they'll provide us with job recs that we can help to hopefully source and help fill positions. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the job seekers or the candidates. So in both scenarios, kind of the first month of the big thing that you really need is you need companies that actually want to work with you. So you need to kind of build up a client roster. And then once you have that, you need to be able to find that talent that is looking for opportunities to match them with the job openings that you do have. It's tough in the beginning because, especially like as a one-person show when I was starting off, you might have a situation where, okay, I have a few different clients and I feel like I have a bunch of open roles, but now I have no candidates that are a good fit for that, so I have to spend all my time on the candidate side. And then sometimes it was super candidate imbalance, where it's like I have a ton of great candidates, I have all these people reaching out and I would love to place them, but I'm only working with 2 or 3 different companies and it's just not a good fit. So it was kind of tough to be able to balance that side just off the bat.
Right, yeah. And so it's this chicken and egg problem, right? It's like you got to get both and you got to match them together. When did you start to hit your stride there? Like the first month wasn't anything huge, right?
No, I didn't make a dime until 4 months in. So
4 months in, okay.
It was something that was definitely like a scary experience, and there were certainly a number of times where I felt like I was really close and things fell through, whether it was a candidate didn't accept their offer or just some small aspect or another, like just felt like I was right there and then things fell through. So it took a little bit of time to really get to a point where the money and just like any modicum of success was happening. And I think the interesting thing about recruiting in general and kind of the recruiting that I do is permanent placement recruiting. So it's typically like especially on the smaller end, it can be like a chunky revenue business where like, hey, 1 month you might make a bunch of money and then 2 months later you don't make any money. So it can be a little bit challenging, especially when you don't have a lot of money in the bank from previous placements or anything like that. Like there was no money in the bank other than my own personal savings. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking in those first few months to think about, okay, did I really make the right decision? Like it's been a number of months and I haven't had that success. Even going back to my first job out of college, like I made my first placement 6 weeks. I think it was less than that, like 6 weeks into it. And I was like, I did that when I was 22 years old, and now I'm almost 30 years old, and I'm building this business, and the success isn't happening. Like, did I make a mistake? And then once you get a little bit of success, I feel like you're able to build upon that and build upon that, and your kind of confidence builds, and that was definitely helpful for me.
Yeah. So when you were going through this process of getting no sales, where was your focus? Was it getting more people that you could kind of pull from, more candidates? Or was it getting more clients on board? What was the constraint that you had to really focus on?
I would say it was both.
Yeah.
It was definitely trying to find the right clients and then trying to match those with the right candidates, because at least when I started on, and from probably like anybody who's maybe like been in a similar situation, like when you start working with different clients, especially in my recruiting world, it's on a non-exclusive contingency based basis. So they don't pay anything up front, and there's not a huge disincentive for them to not work with Proof of Talent. So sometimes I would have clients that would kind of spin my wheels and not have the openings that they would say or things like that. So it was about fine-tuning the right customer for me that was at the right point in their life cycle, and then also being able to fine-tune the candidate search process and making sure that the work that I was doing and the time that I was spending, because there's only so much time in the day, especially when you're doing it on your own, but trying to fine-tune the processes in general and like learn who's the ideal customer and how do I find the ideal candidate.
Right. And so you were mentioning the clients they don't have to go with Proof of Talent, right? They give you this role that they're looking for, and then you can fill it or someone else can fill it, or is that how it works?
Yeah, so in recruiting in general, there are a couple different like paths to this. There's like the non-exclusive approach where they can work with 100 agencies if they want. They can work with one, they can work with 5. Then there's exclusive, and in that case, they would have to work with Proof of Talent. They couldn't work with anybody else. And then lastly, and this is probably like the highest level of recruiting, and there's retainer-based, where they either pay you a portion of the fee up front, or the anticipated fee, or they pay you the entirety. So for like, let's say Fortune 500 C-level executives, there are these large like retainer-based search firms. If they want to find a new CEO for, say, Pepsi, there are these like long established headhunting firms. They're mostly retainer based, so they take a portion of that money up front because they know it's going to take us a long time to fill this role. So we want insurance that if we're spending our time on it, we're going to still get paid for it. You're going to give us that kind of investment. And then like the lowest barrier to entry is this contingency based work that I do. And at some point in time, I'd like to move up the ladder to more contingency-based and potentially retainer. But as you are trying to, I think at least for me, like find the ideal customer and really improve the quality of your service as well, I wanted to go with a contingency-based type of approach, just because I want to make sure that if I am asking a company that's hiring, if I'm asking them, they're only allowed to work with me, I want to be 100% confident that I'm going to be able to provide them with a level of service that they would only be able to get from me before I do that.
Right. And so once you built up a bit of credibility and history and you got a bigger team, then you can kind of go up the ladder. And is the goal to get to that retainer level?
At some point, potentially, I think the exclusive based search is probably like the next step, and try to take things a step at a time. And once we get to that, then I'll worry about the retainer base. But I think that's the next step,
right?
As we continue to improve service and just prove value to these companies that we work with.
Okay, so let's go back to your growth here. The first few months, you didn't get any sales. Then magic happened. You got the first sale. What was the process from that point forward? Did anything change in your strategy and how you approach people, or how did the first sale impact the course of the business?
I think the first sale gave me a lot of confidence, and it just showed me like that I could actually do it. And it was for me, it was just a big moment to like have that, basically that check or the wire hit like the bank account and be like, okay, like there's actually revenue here. This is a real business. I haven't just spent 3 months sitting at my desk talking to a bunch of people for no reason. So like that gave me the confidence to go out, and it was kind of two wins in pretty short order, where I had two accepted offers, and like one in November and then one in December, and both were larger salary positions. So the fees were relatively high, and that just gave me the confidence to kind of say, okay, like I can continue on in this path. And yes, the first few months were not great, but if I continue to work at this and continue to chip away, I'm going to get to a position where I'll be comfortable with this, and I'll be able to, have the success that I'm looking for, and grow the business.
Right. Do you think that first placement also did anything for your clients to say like, hey, here I've now placed someone, we can do this. Now the clients can have more trust in you?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And for me, at least the way I look at it, like everything is kind of this like snowball effect where just starting off, it's really difficult because you're trying to prove to people that you can do the job, having not done the job yet. You're trying to market yourself as somebody who can do the job, but you haven't really done it yet. So you're just kind of saying, hey, I can do this. And now, especially even like a year later, now we're getting to a point where we're starting to place a number of candidates, and we're starting to see success. And our clients are starting to reach back out to us as soon as they have something that they need help with, and ask us for that assistance. And it allows kind of for a little bit of a snowball effect where it's like, okay, you place somebody, you build up that client trust, and then you get 2 more job opportunities to work with them in the future. And then you might be able to have a case study or some type of marketing material based upon the success that you've had. You can put that out. Another company's going to reach out to you. So I think in a lot of ways, just like success begets success. And it was really, really difficult to like even build up that snowball at the top to like push it down the hill a little bit. And now we're starting to pick up some momentum, which has been just hugely helpful for us.
Yeah. And that first sale, it also kind of, it breathes life into the company, right? It gives you resources now that you're not just bleeding money every month. Yeah.
That's just huge.
Yeah. And it's a big fee too, right? Like we were talking off camera, it's 20% for a placement. So in the early stages, these are really important. Even if you've almost got 3 or 4, it's $0 until you get that big placement. Yeah. And then you can, that's maybe a few months rent all in one.
Yeah.
Or a few months operating expenses.
It was definitely difficult for the first few months, and then like we were saying before, like the first placement itself was $30,000. So
wow.
It's not it sounds like a lot off the top, but when you don't make money for 3 months beforehand, it's averaged out. It's not too much, but it gets to a point where, once you have that level of success and you can make that a repeatable process, which is, I think, really the big aspect of things, is trying to have success initially, but then be able to put the systems and processes in place to be able to repeat that and not have any like major lulls in the business where you're running low on cash. You're just not having that success that you'd like to see.
Right. And so after your first sale, you got your first employee, right? When was this in the timeline? How many months ago was your first employee?
November of 20. I started the business in June of 2019. The first placement we ever had was in November, and then once that happened, I made that placement, and there was another one that came shortly thereafter. And I started to look at the kind of situation overall and think, okay, like maybe now I'm at a point where I can think about bringing in another person into the business to work alongside me. And I got really lucky. There was a webinar that I had hosted. Clay Collins, who runs Nomics and has the Flippening podcast, which is a cryptocurrency podcast, invited me on to do a webinar about hiring in the blockchain industry. And somebody that had connected with me on LinkedIn was in the chat asking a bunch of like very pointed questions about hiring in the crypto world. And after the chat, I had noticed him in the webinar chats. I shot him a message on LinkedIn, like, hey, I don't know what your intentions are in the on that webinar, but I'm likely going to be hiring somebody in the near future and would love to have a chat with you just about like what your goals are for the future. And a few just Zoom calls later, probably 3 or 4 Zoom calls, we had a chance to talk about different things and kind of goals. And this was somebody that was working at a recruiting firm, kind of had that prerequisite experience that I was really looking for, and was just super passionate about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency industry, and it was kind of like exactly what I was looking for. So I feel super grateful to have found him for that, and ended up hiring this individual, Colton, who works with me. He's my senior recruiter now. We started the first week of March. So he's been with me for a little bit over 3 months at this point in time.
Very cool. And are you guys entirely remote now? Are you working? Where are you working out of right now?
So I work out of Brooklyn. Colton was actually in San Francisco and just moved back to the East Coast. But we've been remote the entire time, which it was always a goal to be remote. I have a second bedroom in my apartment, which has kind of always been my office, and I don't mind working remote. I like it. And Colton was in San Francisco, and that was kind of a nice big balance. But 2 weeks into his employment, I was actually supposed to go out there the week all the lockdown shut down for coronavirus. So I had met Colton. I flew out to San Francisco in early February to hang out with him and to just like see if we liked each other enough to actually work together. So we did that, and I got a chance to meet him in person. But actually, since he started, I have not gotten a chance to work with him for a day, actually in the same location. So it's been entirely remote over the past 3+ months just due to the coronavirus situation, which is kind of crazy, but it's worked out well. So
yeah, I mean, the crypto industry though, it's like a remote first. It's been that way for years, right? A lot of the teams that have built things in crypto have been remote first or spread across multiple continents. And is there something that do you think that gives you an advantage in recruiting when you have this like DNA of being remote and understanding how how crypto is just it's a unique industry where everyone's working remote, everyone is very informal, people aren't walking around in suits. It's not like a traditional, when I think of a recruiting firm, I think of like a very professional, traditional kind of firm with lots of suits. In crypto, the whole industry is like, it's happening on Twitter, it's happening at these conferences, it's all informal. Do you think that gives you an advantage in the space?
I definitely do. I think that, and that was one of the big theses that I had around starting the business was like, at least for me, because I had the opportunity to work at Airswap, and I had the YouTube channel and had a number of friends and was kind of involved in a number of these little crypto Twitter circles and Telegram circles, and knew a number of different business leaders in the space. I felt like I was kind of already on the inside of the party. And when you are starting a service business, for the most part, nobody cares. I just remember when I was doing sales essentially for the recruiting company that I worked at previously, you're just another recruiting company. Nobody really cares. There's not a huge differentiator for a lot of these different service providers, but you're kind of like there's already a party happening, and you're basically on the outside, knocking on the door, hey, let me in. I kind of felt like I was already on the inside of the party and just had to walk around politely and say hey, I'm doing this now. If you have any interest in working together, would love to do so. If not, no big deal. So that was kind of the approach that I took, especially in the early stages, was just kind of letting people lightly know, hey, I've started this recruiting firm. If I can help you out in any way, I saw you said on Twitter that you were hiring. And that's something that I've been able to do. And even to your point too, so much of the business happens in these different kind of weird areas that traditional recruiting firms have no idea about. They're gonna sit there and cold call. Meanwhile, the majority of crypto companies don't have desk phones. I don't know who you're cold calling or what you're cold calling about, but there's not a phone directory to call into 99% of these crypto companies. Meanwhile, I can send somebody a DM that follows me on Twitter or that I'm connected to, or I'm in the same group on Telegram, and just shoot them a quick message, and we can talk back and forth over the course of 5 seconds. And it's just to me, it's a very different type of approach that I'm sure some other recruiters, I don't want to sound like I'm the only person in the world that's thought to use Twitter or Telegram in terms of client relationships before, but it is something that is very much completely a different ball game from the traditional world of recruitment that I've seen.
Do you think, when you think about all the different channels, you got Twitter, Telegram, LinkedIn, you got YouTube maybe, you got email, cold calling, all these channels, have you found one that's most effective for you guys right now?
On the candidate side, LinkedIn is still definitely king, I would say. I think we use a combination of LinkedIn really heavily. On the candidate side, Twitter as well is pretty great. And those are probably the two big outreach places for individual conversations, like Twitter, DM as well. But then also Telegram is pretty prevalent, especially on the client side. But I used to work at LinkedIn too, so I know all the corporate solutions and the products and all that type of stuff. But that's the biggest, outside of just salaries. LinkedIn is our biggest expense as a company.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Do you think YouTube at all has made your life any easier, having this big audience already there in crypto? Do you think that has made your job easier, or is that a little bit outside of the realm of recruiting?
I would say a little bit. It's definitely helped in terms of just reputation in general and maybe quote unquote brand awareness. I've had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, I used to watch your YouTube videos, or I used to listen to your podcast, and I'm interested in XYZ job, or hey, we're hiring for our company now. So I've had that happen a lot. I have pulled back quite a bit on the amount of videos and podcast. I used to do a video or podcast once a day.
Wow.
And it would be about the daily market movements and things like that, and talking about the price of Bitcoin as much as I like doing it, or different cryptocurrencies that are going up and down, doesn't necessarily add any value to what we do as a recruiting firm. And it's in some cases two pretty different audiences. So I've definitely pulled back a little bit just because I've been more focused on trying to build value and equity in the business, and not as much on the overall YouTube brand or YouTube metrics in general. So it has been something where I definitely don't do it as often as I did previously, and because of that, I think also the numbers get affected and things like that. And some people just do it now full time, and they put out tremendous content, and I just can't match the level of depth and research that they put into certain things on a YouTube or in a podcast.
Right. So now that you've pulled back your energy and time on YouTube and creating content, where has that been directed to grow the business?
Sure. So it's really on the day-to-day, and that's in both parts of working with clients and working with candidates. I mean, there's only so many hours within the day, and there's a lot of jobs that we typically have the opportunity to work on. So there's always something new to do, and there's always kind of a different outreach that you can have, or potentially a different way you can try to prospect into new clients or candidates. And we have the business, at least from the recruiting standpoint, split up pretty nicely right now, where my senior recruiter Colton primarily is the one who has the majority of the client or the candidate relationships, and I mostly work on existing client relationships as well as new business. So having conversations with different companies that are maybe interested in using our services, or reaching out to potential new ones as well, and then just handling the back end, the infrastructure, the finances, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of time to spend outside of the YouTube world. That's helpful. I would say the one thing though, and this is relatively new development, but I think in the near future, within the next month or so, we're kind of switching up the Crypto Bobby podcast in general to be something that's going to focus a little bit more on careers in particular. So we're going to interview different, I don't want to say average Joes, but the folks that are working in regular roles in the crypto industry. So software engineers or marketers or lawyers or different individuals like that have very parallel career paths to what other people are interested in, just to tell their stories about how they got into the industry and things that they would essentially recommend to other job seekers. Because I think that content is probably a little bit underserved. There's a lot of people that interview the CEOs of all these different companies that maybe it's like the Brian Armstrongs or the CZs or those types of individuals that have these 500-person companies, and it's awesome to hear them talk, but at the same point in time, how many people are ever going to be the CEO of a 500-person company? Probably not many. There's a lot more maybe parallel to hearing about somebody in a similar role that maybe left the traditional finance world or the traditional tech world a few years ago and got into the crypto industry and has some insights or advice on how you can do the same. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking to kind of switch the content into. And it's I think it'll be interesting because I think a lot less people are going to care about it, to be honest. Like, I think when you look at the YouTube or the just landscape in general of crypto content, what does well is people talking about whether the price of Bitcoin is going to go up or down, and basically when moon is the most popular thing, not necessarily whether or not, or like how to get specific career insights into the space. But if we talk to 50 people that are super targeted in comparison to 5,000 people that aren't, I would rather talk to the 50 people at this point just in the business.
Right. Yeah, it makes more sense everything in crypto is like, if it's about price, it's going to get attention, right? And it almost, but then you think about it and it's like, you're not really getting attention from the people who you want the attention from in your position. Okay. So you hired your first employee and you've now split the business into client side versus candidate side. And talk to me about the last few months, because you guys have been growing. I saw a tweet that said 60% quarter over quarter, and then now the last quarter's been about 100%. So talk to me about how then you've worked together to scale the business to where it is today.
Yeah, so I'll say too, like, everything that we've done has kind of been gradual improvements. And it feels like, at least for me, it's taking forever. Like, when I think about the day-to-day and the week-to-week, I feel like the improvements that I put forward as an individual or the company is putting forward are just like too slow. But then when I look back, and actually reflect on it, like, wow, things have actually improved at a relatively quick time frame. So some of it for me is just like a matter of like patience. It's like, okay, like, you just need to concentrate on these incremental improvements, and in the very short picture, it might not look like that big of a deal, but looking back on it, it will have big impacts on the business. But over the past, I would say like 3 months, really, we've definitely started to see a nice degree of success. We've started to develop a really ideal kind of customer profile as to the type of firm that we do best working with. And we've started to kind of narrow in on the best ways to work with those customers. And then having Colton on, having the senior recruiter that I work with, and working alongside me has really doubled the output of what we're able to do and the productivity that we're able to have. And it's allowed us to really, between like the efficiencies and the knowledge improvement that we've gained over the past like 9 months, plus having basically 2 people in comparison to 1 person, it's allowed us to basically like triple revenue over the course of nine months, which has been really, really helpful and impactful to, for the business. And it's been great to see overall.
Yeah. So revenue, you said a while back, I think off the camera, it was about 60,000 in a month now, coming up from like zero per month for about 4 months just a year ago.
Yeah, that's roughly where we're at right now is a little bit over that range, and that's been. And again, the recruiting world can be a little bit chunky too. So it's something where, hey, 1 month you might have $90,000 in a month, and the next month you might have 0. But right. As long as like the quarters to me are trending in the right direction, that is a really positive place for us to be at. And I think ultimately the recruiting game in particular, it's really driven by headcount. It can be a little bit of a vanity metric, but the more headcount you have on a team, typically the higher the output that you're able to do, and usually that'll be indicative of revenue. But again, it's a little bit of like a chicken and egg problem, because unless you have a ton of cash reserves, you can't hire headcount. So you kind of have to get to a point in the business where you're performing the impact of 3 people for what you have with 2 people. And that was kind of the difficulty for me in the beginning too, was I was always trying to get to that point where I would have another person working with me. But you kind of have to build a business to not only sustain yourself, but you have to build a business to a point where you're working basically twice as hard. So you are confident that you can sustain yourself and another salary at some point in time, which was a little bit frightening and a little bit scary, but it's all like you either pay yourself or you pay your business. And once I feel like you can comfortably pay yourself, you have to look into paying the business and how you can generate a better return on that money rather than just putting that money back into your own pocket.
Yeah. Is the you were talking about scaling up and how it's tied to headcount for the most part. Is that just because people need to be on the phones calling or messaging and it just takes time, or is there some other element there?
So recruiting in particular is not I would say a massively scalable business to outside of individuals working like in seat. And what I mean by that is like I would say you can definitely have super productive individuals. Like Colton on my team now is killing it. He's highly productive, and he's doing a ton in terms of like bringing in billable revenue, which is fantastic. But at a certain point in time, there's probably going to be potentially going to be a like cap as far as the amount that he can literally do in a day. So there's not like let's say for a software company or for some type of tech SaaS company, you can probably scale pretty far with only a certain number of employees. Like the restrictor on growth isn't your employee count. It might be the amount of money you can pay for servers or just how quickly you can put out new product, etc. A lot of times in recruiting firms, like the limiter is I can only recruit on 5 positions a day, or I can only recruit on 1 position a day. So you have to kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, are we at our max capacity yet? And if so, can we actually afford to bring somebody else on? If not, we might be at our max capacity, but we still have to do well for another few months before we can actually bring on somebody else into the business to help up that capacity and boost that up. So that's kind of the long-term view on my end is like, all right, we need to make sure that we are maximizing the amount of work that we can do and bring in the best service to our clients. And so our clients aren't suffering because we're shorthanded, but at the same point in time, have to look far ahead enough in the future to know it takes probably at least 2 months to hire somebody. And if not, maybe like 3 to 4 months for somebody that like we're really excited about in our business. So I need to look far enough into the future to start that process ahead of time. Because if we don't, when we get to that point 4 months into the future, 3 months into the future, we might be maxing out our capacity and having to turn customers away or something like that. And you just never want to be doing that.
Right. How do you think about competition from the services that are not really, they're not the hand-holding services, they're like the job boards or the what's the really popular job board? I'm forgetting the name of it. Indeed. Like these kind of services that it's not like a personal relationship. It's just kind of an upload a resume and see if you fit. How do you think about that competing against you? Is that a totally different market or?
I don't necessarily think so. I think in a lot of cases it's complementary, but a lot of times the value that we provide to companies is, especially like our sweet spot right now is probably between Series A to Series C level firms, and they're growing really quickly. Like let's say it's a crypto exchange in San Francisco or New York. They have 50 employees right now, and they're trying to double headcount the next year. They have an HR person on staff, or they have a recruiter on staff, but they're absolutely swamped. Like just up to their eyeballs in internal meetings and setting up internal interviews and extending offers. For the most part, they're super time constricted. So the last thing a lot of these folks want to be doing is going on to Indeed and sorting through 100 resumes, because a lot of times, and like we post jobs on LinkedIn. We like that's part of the corporate package that we have. We have a number of job postings that we have available so people can apply to our roles on Group Talent. when you post a job, I would say out of 100, maybe 5 people are actually a good potential fit for that role. So you have to sort through 95 other resumes, and that could take 5 minutes. It could take an hour. Who knows? But it is time consuming, and that process in general. Instead of the company doing that, instead of either their internal HR team or the recruiter, whoever it might be internally, they offload that to us. And what that allows them to do is to basically just focus on the most, I think, time impactful type of activities for them. And on our end, what we end up doing is we'll go through the job postings, or we'll do the headhunting process. We'll reach out directly to candidates. And the only people that they see from us are people that we've already pre-screened, we've already verified their background, their information, and we've already kind of given them a number of bullet points as far as what they're looking for, salary expectations, all the details that are applicable for a company to consider a candidate. Basically hand them somebody on a silver platter, hand them a resume on a silver platter and say, hey, this person is interested in working at your organization. Here's everything you need to know about them. If you want to interview them, we'll set that up. If not, great. But that kind of time offload process is usually like the value that we provide. And if they want to post a bunch of jobs on AngelList or on Indeed or on LinkedIn, it's obviously more power to them.
Right. And then it's that value that allows you to command that fee, right? And kind of differentiate yourself from the Indeeds.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about really providing it. And I think the great thing too about the recruiting model, or this particular recruiting model in general, is we are contingency based. So we don't charge a fee unless a company hires someone from us. So we can spend 100 hours trying to recruit for a project manager or product manager for a company, and if we don't find anybody good, or if they go through a bunch of interviews and no one that we put forward is a good fit, we don't get paid anything. However, if they do hire somebody, we'll charge a fee based upon that. But I like this model because I feel like I can go to sleep at night knowing, okay, if they hire somebody from us and we send them an invoice, that is an invoice that we've actually provided value for, and that they should feel comfortable paying that to us. On the flip side, if we don't deliver, the biggest, I would say, cost to them is probably about an hour of time that they spend with us prior to that position. So yes, I feel bad that we weren't able to deliver the quality or the type of candidates that they were looking for, but they're not out $10,000 or something like that because we weren't able to deliver.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, I got one more question for you. You imagine you're back a year ago before you started this business now, and what's a piece of advice that you'd give to yourself? Or anyone starting a business, now that you've been through the process?
I would say it takes time. That's the biggest thing, is it takes time, and especially if you're leaving the comfort of a full-time role, or if you've been somebody who has often had salaries and just basically been in a comfortable position financially for a while, have a nest egg built up that allows you to have the runway to feel confident in your decision. I would say preferably like 6 months. I know for me, that was kind of the basically like the runway I gave myself. But I feel like if you're starting a business and you give yourself a month to be successful, you might have a fantastic idea, but it might take 6, 8, 10 months to see any type of results. So you need to give yourself more time. So you need to put yourself in a position where you're financially able to give yourself that time without absolutely stressing yourself out and really worrying yourself. So I think that is, to me, that's been the biggest thing, is like, hey, if I looked at the first 3 months and how rough that was versus the last 3 months that we've had, it's a totally different ballgame. It feels wonderful to come from that, to come from basically nothing to where now I feel like in a good spot and actually delivering for our clients and candidates, and also generating revenue and building a sustainable business. But if I didn't give myself time to get to this point, I think some people probably after 3 or 4 months would have just packed it up and said, okay, I'm going to go back. But luckily I was either too resilient or too dumb to do differently.
That's awesome. I love that advice. And I think it's so true in the beginning, right? Like you can't necessarily time those first few months, But now I think maybe you're getting to the point where you can't predict perfectly how much revenue you're going to make, but you have a better sense now that you're 6, 10, 12 months into it than in those first few months, and you just need that buffer at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the longer you go, I think the more data you get to the entire business, that gives you just the insights that you need to know, like, okay, here's the work I need to do to get to XYZ results. And that's been really helpful over time too. It's just like I've always had systems and data kind of set up to at least like gather that, so I could run insights and reports based upon things. And in the first 3 months, it's not too helpful. But now that we're getting to a point, we can start to see, okay, 75% of the people that we extend a job offer to accept. So we need to have XYZ offers to get to XYZ in revenue. But what do we need to do to get those offers? How many people do we need to speak to? How many job recs do we need to have? All that type of stuff I feel like helps working on like a top to bottom down approach.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Super insightful stuff, and wishing you all the best for a big quarter. I'll be looking out for some updates on Twitter.
Thank you. I appreciate it.